The story did not end on the mountain. It began to move, like wind through dry fields, like a flame finding kindling in human hearts. Those who once hid in fear now walked with light in their eyes. The fisherman, the tax collector, the doubter. They carried a message stronger than any sword. They spoke of a kingdom unseen, of a love that could not be silenced. They carried no armies, no gold, only the truth that had risen from the grave. And wherever they walked, something in the air began to change. In the streets of Jerusalem, crowds gathered beneath the morning sun. The same stones that once echoed cries of "Crucify" now heard songs of hope. Peter stood among them. The man who had once denied now stood unshaken. The fire that once burned on his face by the courtyard flame now burned within him. He spoke, not as a fisherman, but as one who had seen eternity. "Repent," he said, "for the promise is for all who believe." And as his words filled the air, the wind began to move. A sound like thunder, but gentle, a light that burned without flame. And upon each of them, the Spirit descended. They spoke in voices not their own, and the nations heard their own languages spoken by strangers. Fear turned to awe. Skeptics turned to believers. The Spirit had come. From that day, the world began to awaken. In the marketplaces, strangers shared bread. In the alleys, the sick were touched and healed. Chains fell without keys. Hearts opened without persuasion. The miracle was not just in heaven. It was walking on the earth again. Peter healed a beggar at the temple gate. A man who had never walked stood upright for the first time. His cry shook the stones. "I can walk! I can walk!" The crowd fell silent, and in that silence, faith found its voice. But not all welcomed the light. The priests murmured. The empire frowned. Those who ruled through fear saw their power tremble before compassion. Followers were hunted, imprisoned, mocked. Some fled to mountains and deserts. Some were silenced by swords. But even in chains, they sang. Because faith cannot be buried, and love does not bow to empires. Every drop of blood that fell on the earth became a seed. And from those seeds, hope grew wild and unstoppable. In the deserts of Judea, a man named Saul rode with fury in his heart. He carried scrolls of authority, vows to extinguish this flame of faith. He believed he served righteousness. He believed he defended truth. But truth was about to meet him in a blaze brighter than the sun. On the road to Damascus, light struck the dust before him. His horse reared, his body fell, and the world went white. He covered his eyes, trembling. A voice thundered through the silence. "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He could not answer. He could only bow his face to the ground, the fire of heaven burning his pride to ashes. "Who are you, Lord?" he whispered. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." And in that moment, the hunter became the found. For 3 days he sat in blindness, his soul stripped bare. And when his eyes opened again, they saw not what they once saw. In the silence that followed the storm, the world stood still between sorrow and eternity. The earth had trembled, the veil had torn, and yet, in the hearts of men, a question lingered like the final echo of thunder. Was this truly the end, or the beginning? Through the streets of Jerusalem, where shadows stretched long and torches still burned, souls wandered between disbelief and dread. The blood of the innocent still marked the stones, and every drop told a story of sacrifice beyond measure. Mary walked among them, her steps slow, her veil damp with tears that refused to dry. In her eyes lived both agony and faith, a contradiction only love could endure. Each heartbeat whispered her son's name. Each breath tasted of memory and dust. The wind carried faint murmurs of the crowd, some in mourning, others in fear. The same voices that once shouted, "Hosanna," now spoke only in hushed regret. Humanity had crucified hope, and now waited in darkness to see if it would rise again. Night came heavy upon the city. Torches flickered, revealing faces half hidden by grief. Nicodemus moved through the narrow streets, his arms burdened with jars of myrrh and aloes, each step an act of silent devotion. He did not speak, for words had no strength left, only the soft crack of his sandals against the stones and the fragile glow of his flame guiding him toward the tomb. Above, the sky was torn between moonlight and cloud, between morning and mystery. Every star seemed to hesitate before shining, as if the heavens themselves grieved. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with incense and sorrow. The sacred body lay still, wrapped in linen, a vessel of pain, yet touched by something eternal. Hands trembled as they sealed the fabric, each fold a farewell, each knot a promise that death would not speak the final word. The stone rolled, grinding against the earth, echoing into the valley like the roar of finality. Dust rose, catching in candlelight, and for a moment, the world seemed to exhale in surrender. But faith does not die easily. It lingers, like the last ember beneath the ashes. And even in silence, something unseen was stirring. Mary knelt before the tomb, her face pressed to the cold surface of the stone. Her tears left traces of light in the flicker of the flame, and her voice, though broken, carried eternity's weight. "My son," she whispered, but her words were not of despair. They were a prayer for what she could not yet see. The soldiers stood guard, their armor glinting faintly in the firelight. They were men of order, bound by duty, but even they felt the strange unease of that night. For in the still air of that sealed chamber, a peace too deep for understanding began to move. The earth beneath them held its breath. The night deepened, and somewhere beyond the stars, a promise began to wake. Dawn crept slowly across the horizon. The city stirred, unaware that history itself was waiting beneath a stone. Birds sang timidly, their voices trembling as if afraid to disturb the silence. And then, faintly, the first ray of light entered the tomb. It touched the linen, warm and golden against the pale fabric. The air shifted, the flame of a candle wavered and stood still. From that stillness, a whisper, not heard but felt, filled the chamber. Life returns. The light grew stronger, curling through the chamber like breath into lungs. The linen stirred just slightly, as though memory itself was awakening. And then, with a silence deeper than thunder, the impossible began. The body that once bore the weight of the world was no longer bound by death. It rose, not with power, but with grace, as if lifted by eternity's own hands. The light wrapped around him like morning mist, and the wounds that once bled now glowed with divine fire. The stone trembled, dust fell from its edges, the seal cracked. Outside, a Roman soldier's torch flickered violently. He looked toward the tomb uncertain, his heart pounding louder than the wind. The earth shifted beneath his feet, and the whisper became a pulse. Within the tomb, the flame of the candle bowed to a greater light, and where there had been death, there was now radiance. The shroud lay folded neatly, the imprint of divinity lingering in the air. And from the darkness of that sealed place, a light rose that would never fade again. Outside, the wind carried new life. The olive trees swayed, and the birds sang as though creation itself had remembered the language of joy. The clouds parted, revealing a sun brighter than any that had come before. Mary felt it before she saw it, a warmth on her skin, a trembling in her heart that defied all grief. She turned toward the tomb, and though her eyes were blurred with tears, she saw light pouring through the cracks in the stone. Her breath caught, her soul knew. She fell to her knees, hands trembling as the wind surrounded her, lifting the edges of her veil like unseen wings. And in that moment, her sorrow turned to awe. Meanwhile, Peter walked through the ruins of his guilt. Every shadow seemed to whisper his denial. He could not forgive himself. He could not believe that the one he had loved was gone forever. Yet in the quiet morning, he felt something on the wind. A scent, faint but familiar, like myrrh and dawn and memory. He looked toward the east. The city was awakening, but deep within him, a flicker of something sacred began to stir. He fell to his knees beside the fire's ashes, eyes wet with shame and hope intertwined. And as the first bird sang above the rooftops, he whispered into the wind, "If you can hear me, forgive me." The answer did not come as a voice, but as warmth, gentle, persistent, divine, like the breath of mercy itself. In the garden, the stone had rolled aside. The world did not notice. No trumpets sounded, no armies gathered. The greatest moment in history arrived in silence. Light poured from the tomb like liquid gold, and in that light, a figure stepped forth, clothed not in splendor, but in peace. The marks of love still in his hands, the memory of pain still in his eyes, yet beyond them, eternity. He looked upon the dawn, and the dawn bowed before him. Every leaf glistened, every breeze sang his name. Life had conquered death, grace had found its voice. Words spread like wind through olive trees. The guards fled in terror, their torches falling to the ground. But faith, once fragile, now burned with the fire of heaven. Mary ran toward the tomb, her heart pounding like a prayer. The air shimmered, and for a moment she thought she saw him, the shape of love in human form, bathed in gold and morning light. She fell to the earth, trembling, not in fear, but in awe. Her tears met the soil, and from them flowers seemed to bloom. The earth itself was reborn. "Do not weep," a voice whispered through her heart, "for I am here." And though her eyes could not comprehend, her soul did. Faith had found her again. Beyond Jerusalem, the hills shimmered under dawn. Shepherds looked up from their flocks, feeling a strange warmth on their faces. Children awoke to birdsong unlike any before. Even the rivers seemed to flow with gentler rhythm. Creation itself rejoiced, for the one who made it all had walked once more among the living. And so began the day after death, a dawn that would never end. Soft orchestral rise, transition point. In the following days, the world began to change quietly. He appeared not to kings, but to hearts, not to the powerful, but to the broken. Those who had known despair now knew grace. Those who had run in fear now walked in faith. He walked through walls not to impress, but to remind that nothing made by men could ever contain what was divine. Every breath, every word, was a bridge between heaven and earth. And though the world did not yet understand, the light had already won. The morning after the impossible had become real, Jerusalem stirred with uncertainty. Rumors whispered through the alleys, carried by trembling voices. The tomb is empty. He is gone. But he was not gone. He was walking again among the living, not in glory or thunder, but in silence and light. Every step was a miracle disguised as a footprint on dust. The sun climbed higher, painting the stones gold, and Mary walked the road alone. Her hands trembled as she searched, not knowing what her eyes sought, a sign, a word, a shadow that might speak peace. And then she saw him. At first, she did not recognize the figure standing in the garden. The air shimmered around him, a glow of morning woven into flesh. He turned toward her, and the world seemed to breathe again. "Why do you weep?" he asked. And in that voice, the universe remembered its heartbeat. Her tears fell faster, but now they were tears of awakening. She fell to her knees, whispering his name like a secret the earth had kept. "Rabboni," she said, and the sound itself was worship. He smiled, gentle, radiant, eternal, and told her not to cling to what must now ascend. "For I go to prepare a place," he said, and each word carried light into the world's darkest corners. That same evening, fear still filled the house where his friends hid. The doors were locked. The shadows whispered doubt and shame. Peter sat apart, his eyes red with sleepless repentance. Thomas stared at the floor, his heart torn between memory and disbelief. The sound came first, like the wind shifting through eternity, and then light, warm and pure, flooded the room. He was there. No key had turned, no door had opened, and yet the presence entered as if it had never left. Peace filled the air like incense, They could not speak.
I denied
Every
you
fear,
3
every question
times.
melted in his gaze. "Peace be with you," he
Please
said, and the
forgive
words
me.
carried the weight of oceans. He showed them his hands, the marks of love unbroken. He breathed upon them, and the breath of creation stirred again within human lungs. "Receive the Spirit," he whispered, and the room trembled with the pulse of heaven. Tears fell, laughter broke, awe silenced
Feed my
reason.
sheep.
Peter knelt first, his face buried in his hands. He could not look up. He could not believe forgiveness could feel so real. But when he did, he saw no condemnation, only mercy infinite as light.
Come, my
Days
friends,
passed,
let
and hope
us
spread
eat
quietly.
together.
Through fields,
It is
through
the
markets, through
Lord.
whispers in the night, the story
He
moved from
has
heart to heart.
returned.
Faith was reborn not in temples, but in the streets, among those who had nothing left but
There
longing.
is a love
Thomas, still
greater
restless,
than
wandered
fear.
apart. He wanted proof, something his hands could
Calm
touch,
as the
something that would not
sea
fade like a dream.
itself.
And then, once more, he stood before them all. The room brightened with the color of eternity. Thomas froze. The others watched, breathless. "Reach out your hand," the voice said, "and place it in my side. Do not doubt, believe." Thomas did not move for a moment. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "My Lord, my God." The words broke the silence like dawn through fog. Belief had returned to a world that had forgotten how to believe. Outside, the seasons shifted. The air turned warm, and olive trees blossomed again. Every branch seemed to bow beneath invisible grace. He walked the hills at dusk, the same hills where he once prayed in anguish. Now his steps were peace. The wind played in his hair like a melody remembered from creation itself. Fishermen mended nets along the shore, their faces lined by years of labor and loss. They did not see him at first, only the glint of sunlight on the water. Then a voice called from the distance, "Have you caught anything?" They looked up. The sound was familiar, so familiar it ached. "Cast your net on the right side," he said, and though their hands hesitated, their hearts obeyed. The net filled until it strained and trembled with life. John was the first to understand. "It is the Lord," he whispered. Peter did not wait. He threw himself into the water, swimming through waves of disbelief and joy. When he reached the shore, the fire was already burning, and bread was waiting beside it. "Come," he said, "and eat." The simple meal was holy. Each bite tasted of memory and grace. No words were needed. The silence spoke everything. Then, turning to Peter, he asked 3 times, "Do you love me?" Each answer was a healing. Each confession washed away a denial. And with the final, "Yes, Lord," Peter's heart broke open into freedom. "Then feed my sheep," he said, and the command was not of burden, but of love reborn. The days that followed were filled with quiet wonders. He appeared beside the river where children played. He walked with travelers who did not recognize him until he broke bread and their eyes were opened. He moved through walls of fear and across boundaries of doubt, leaving light wherever he passed. Every encounter became a spark in the dark, and from those sparks, a fire began to grow. The world could no longer contain what had begun. Empires ruled by swords would fall before the gentleness of grace. The weak would speak with strength, the broken would sing again, and though he would soon ascend, he left behind not emptiness, but presence. One evening, he led them to the Mount of Olives. The air was calm, heavy with fragrance. Birds circled overhead as the horizon burned gold. They gathered around him, eyes wide with wonder and sorrow intertwined. "Stay in peace," he told them, "for I am with you, even unto the end of the age." A wind rose, soft, glowing, alive. The earth shimmered beneath his feet, and slowly, like dawn lifting into heaven, he ascended. Their tears fell not in despair, but in awe, for even as he rose beyond their sight, they knew the promise was true. The world would never again be without him. In the days after, The disciples returned to the city. The streets that once smelled of fear now carried the fragrance of hope. They spoke in whispers that grew into songs, songs that turned into courage, and courage that spread like light through every nation. The tomb was empty, but hearts were full. Mary, in her old age, would often sit by the window at dusk. She would close her eyes and listen to the evening breeze. And sometimes, when the light was just right, she felt him near. No words, no visions, just peace. And that was enough. Time passed, but the story never ended. For every soul that suffered, every heart that broke, every tear that fell, his light remained. It whispered through centuries, through deserts and cathedrals, through prisons and palaces, through doubt and faith alike. It said, "Love has already won." And even when the world forgets, he remembers. Even when the night returns, the dawn is never far behind. So if you find yourself lost in silence, if grief has chained your heart, remember this: the stone was rolled away. The light did not end in a tomb. The same fire that rose from death still burns within the human soul. No power of darkness can quench it. No distance can separate it. No sin can silence it. Because love, real, eternal, unbroken love, cannot die. Soft strings rise, choral hum returns. The cross was not defeat, but the door. The tomb was not the end, but the beginning. And through the centuries, in every breath of faith, he walks again. Not above us, but within us. Through every act of kindness, every moment of mercy, every spark of forgiveness, he lives. And in that truth, the world finds its forever dawn. Music fades into light wind and distant choir. Centuries passed, yet the flame never dimmed. Empires changed their banners, kings rose and fell, but in hidden rooms and candlelit chapels, the name that once shook Jerusalem still whispered through the dark. Scribes bent over fragile parchment, copying words born in deserts and prisons. Their ink bled faith into history, every stroke a defiance against forgetting, every letter a seed of eternity. In far lands where the language of Rome faded, simple men and women carried the gospel in their hearts. They built wooden crosses where marble idols once stood. They sang hymns under moonlight where soldiers once shouted war. Through storm and famine, they prayed. Through persecution, they endured. Their voices rose above plague and fire, a chorus of hope no empire could silence. The message spread with the tides, to islands and mountains, to forests and frozen fields. From Jerusalem to Alexandria, from Antioch to Rome, and beyond the edge of maps yet drawn, the light traveled on the breath of sailors, in the prayers of monks, and in the songs of mothers who rocked their children by the fire, telling them of the one who conquered death. Time folded into ages of stone and iron. Cathedrals rose toward the heavens, their towers cutting through clouds as if to remind the world that faith still dared to reach for the divine. Inside their walls, choirs thundered like angels. Incense curled upward like the souls of saints. Candles flickered against stained glass, colors of blood and sky painting the faces of the faithful. Yet even among glory, darkness crept. The same hearts that built temples sometimes forgot the mercy behind them. Greed wore the robes of holiness. Power disguised itself as piety. And still, grace endured. Because truth belongs not to thrones, but to the humble who kneel unseen. In hidden monasteries, far from the noise of kings, men and women prayed without ceasing. They tilled soil by day and copied scripture by night, their candlelight the heartbeat of civilization. When wars burned cities to ash, they preserved the words that once turned fishermen into apostles. When darkness claimed the age, their quiet faith became the world's last lantern. They did not seek glory. They sought only God. And through their silence, history was kept alive. Then came the wanderers, the seekers, those who dared to question and dream. Philosophers looked at the stars and heard again the echo of creation. Let there be light. Artists painted the divine in faces and stone. Music rose from cathedrals like wind through time. Science awoke, not to deny heaven, but to understand its reflection on earth. Faith and reason wrestled, and through their struggle, truth sharpened itself. For even when man doubted God, God did not doubt man. The world marched toward the horizon of discovery. New continents opened. New languages prayed. Ships carried both greed and grace across oceans. Missionaries walked barefoot into jungles and deserts, bearing no weapons, only crosses carved by hand. They spoke to kings and slaves alike, and in the language of compassion, they found common ground. Many died forgotten, their bones buried in foreign soil, but the seeds they planted bloomed in hearts centuries later, because faith sown in love never perishes. The world changed again. Machines replaced candles. Empires traded armor for industry. And yet, amid the noise of progress, souls still searched for meaning in the silence. Church bells competed with factories. Prayers rose through smoke. And though the air thickened with invention, the human heart still longed for the eternal. Some said God was gone, but even in the shadow of doubt, the light whispered through circuitry and steel, "I am still here." Wars came again, louder, greater, more merciless than before. Nations once baptized in peace drowned in their own pride. Fields that once bloomed with harvest became graves for generations. In the trenches, men prayed without knowing why. Under bombardment, soldiers clutched crosses made of wire and mud. In ruined cities, mothers sang hymns to calm their dying children, and heaven wept. Yet even then, among the ashes, the flame endured. Priests carried wounded through smoke. Nurses whispered psalms as bombs fell. Forgiveness was spoken between enemies who had forgotten why they fought. From every horror, a prayer rose, and from every prayer, a promise returned. When the world rebuilt, it carried scars like sacred relics. People sought not conquest, but healing. And once more, faith walked quietly through hospitals and ruins, tending the wounds of both body and spirit. The cross stood again, not as a banner of victory, but as a symbol of endurance, a reminder that love survives even in the darkest hour. In time, the world became louder, faster, restless. The sacred seemed distant, the divine replaced by distraction. Yet in the quiet corners, the hospital bed, the refugee camp, the prison cell, the empty room, the same voice still spoke. Peace be with you. Not through thunder or miracle, but through a whisper in the conscience, a kindness between strangers, a moment of stillness in the noise. The spirit had not departed. It had simply learned new languages. Through screens and satellites, through networks and nations, the word found new ways to travel. Digital walls could not contain it. Pixels became windows to the divine. And even across the void of distance, hearts touched. The message remained unchanged. Love one another. Even now, as centuries turn like pages, the story continues. Not written on scrolls or marble, but on the living hearts of billions. Every act of mercy echoes the resurrection. Every hand that lifts another repeats the miracle of that first dawn. Faith does not belong to one era. It belongs to every soul that dares to hope. Music deepens, slow strings rising under narration. So when the night feels endless and the world forgets its light, remember the story written before time began. That love entered the dust, walked among men, suffered, bled, and rose again. Not to be worshipped from afar, but to dwell within. He walks still, in the doctor's gentle hand, in the stranger's smile, in the forgiveness we give and receive. The tomb remains empty, and eternity still breathes through every sunrise. And if someday the stars themselves fade and history forgets our names, the light will not end. Because the one who conquered death does not dwell in the past. He lives in the pulse of every heart that loves. Listen closely. The same voice that spoke to Mary in the garden speaks to you now. It says, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you until the end of all things." The centuries pass like shadows over water. Empires fade into memory, languages change, but the heart of humanity still beats to the same eternal rhythm. Love given, love received, love enduring beyond the grave. The voice that spoke in Galilee still echoes through time. It whispers in the cradle of the newborn, in the sigh of the dying, in every soul that searches for meaning beneath the stars. The Word became flesh once, but it continues to become life in us each day. Across the horizon of time, mankind builds towers of glass and steel, sending its thoughts beyond the sky. Machines orbit the heavens once walked by angels. Screens flicker with 1,000 false lights, and yet the true light still waits, unchanging. For even in an age of metal and fire, faith remains the quiet heartbeat of the world. No matter how far man reaches, he always looks back toward the dawn. The same dawn that broke the morning the tomb was found open. In cities that never sleep amid the noise of progress, there are still those who pause to pray. Their prayers rise through neon and smoke like incense through cathedral arches. Children still ask, "Who is God?" And mothers still answer with tenderness, "He is love." And that word, spoken in a whisper, carries more power than 1,000 empires. The future unfolds not in thunder, but in choice. Each act of mercy becomes a prophecy fulfilled. Each moment of forgiveness becomes a bridge across time. He walks again through every era, unseen yet present. Through doctors who heal without reward, through workers who build without pride, through the forgotten who still choose compassion over despair. He lives not above history, but within it, through the quiet courage of the humble. Soft strings, shimmering tones of eternity. And though the world changes its face, its wars, its fears, its inventions, the question remains the same: what is truth? Pilate asked it long ago, and every generation repeats it. Yet the answer has never changed. Truth is not a word. It is a person. It is the gaze of mercy, the touch of healing, the forgiveness that refuses to die. The truth walked among us once, and still walks within us now. In distant galaxies, when mankind reaches beyond the stars, the same question will follow them. For even among infinite worlds, the human heart will still hunger for grace. Astronauts will look upon the void and feel not emptiness, but awe. For they will sense, as prophets once did, that love is larger than the universe itself. And though science will measure distances, only faith will measure meaning. There will come a time when nations grow weary of their own noise, when technology cannot cure loneliness, when progress cannot feed the soul. In that moment, the ancient whisper will return. It will not shout through thunder, but breathe softly through the human heart. "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest." The world will pause again, as it did on that first silent morning, and remember that eternity is not found in the stars, but in love that never ends. Low, ambient hum, faint sound of ocean waves blending with choir. Prophets once spoke of an age of peace. They saw lions lie with lambs, swords turned to plowshares, and children laughing without fear. That promise still waits beyond the horizon. It is not a myth. It is a memory of the future. Each time someone forgives instead of hating, the world moves closer. Each time someone chooses compassion over vengeance, the kingdom draws nearer. And when enough hearts awaken, the dawn of heaven will meet the dawn of earth. But before that day, darkness will try once more to whisper its lie, that we are alone. That faith is gone. That love was only a dream. Yet the darkness forgets. It is already lost. because light does not argue with the dark, it simply shines. And even the smallest flame